Welcome back to another episode of Asshole Jobs Nobody Wants to Be Involved In. And here's your host, the biggest asshole job that nobody wants to be involved with. Supra time. Right, so we're ready to do head stuff, i.e. take it off, but there's one more thing I want to check just before we go cracking off the belt, and I need the belt to be able to bar the engine over, and that is, I'm going to check my valve clearances. Now, there's a logic to why I'm doing this. I know we're taking the head off anyway, but I want to make sure that my valves are seating correctly. Now, what I'm going to do here is just get like a 0.3 feeler gauge and just make sure I can get between the cam and the bucket. Now, you would think, well, you'll always be able to do that anyway. Surely the buckets would wear out and get bigger. Not necessarily. See, what will happen is if the valve starts eroding the seat, it will sink further and further in, closing that gap between the cam and the bucket. So if I get 5 and 6 by any chance closing in, that could mean that I'm getting a valve that's not seating right. And if it's not seating right, it's going to cost me compression. After that, belt off, cam's out, head off. And the fun continues. Right, so I didn't expect that. Of all the places for me to find a tight valve, I was expecting at least one of the 8 that are in 5 and 6, but it's not. It's this guy on the inlet, number 1 first valve. Why is that getting tight? I don't know. But what we can take from that is I've probably found another just the start of a problem, which we'll address when we get the head off and make sure it's not a sticking valve, an eroded bucket or whatever else. But the good point is, if I found that in 1, and we've not got any compression issues in 1, by rights, 5 and 6 must be fine with regards to valves, because they're shimming okay. So that's good. Now we can get the head off and probably look for a problem. Remember when I said this was the dream car? It's starting to become a nightmare. I mean, I'm not particularly fussed about having to do a head gasket, you know, it's not something that's beyond me. The problem I've got is all of this stuff came off with a bit of a rager, if you know what I mean. Like, all of these little plugs, connectors and loom roots and all that are not exactly like labelled, so I'm just kind of hoping that when the build up happens and everything's all nice and buttoned up, it just fires up and doesn't give me bother, because if it does, I'll be like, whoa, is it any one of these hundreds of old crusty wires that's possibly split? Like, this is the problem when you have to go this in depth with a car immediately. You don't really know its foibles. Like the TVR was easy, because the TVR I was like, well, I know I've got this issue here, but I've dealt with this issue there. So if it didn't start, I'd be like, I know what that'll be. This is just a quantity of unknown at the moment. So just let's all cross a finger that when this goes back together, it just bloody works. Next step, head bolts out, head off.
No, she's not being completely rude, it's the soundtrack from Shrek. Look at that, mate. Look at him go, that's impressive as f***. The gasket doesn't look f***, mate.
It doesn't look, does
the gasket looks relatively new, actually.
Aye. Scotch Brite. Nice clean.
How's the underside of it? Bugger. That looks intact. I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to tell with the naked eye anyway. Because it was, as you say, only a 50 psi loss, like 33%, it's not as if it was 0.
Right, well, if the head gasket isn't the problem, maybe something deeper is. Let's have a wee look. Oh, bugger! Number 5. Number 1 and number 2 look good. Could this be a smoking gun? Right, well, a leak down test hasn't actually identified the problem with it. So what I'm going to try is just to put some petrol in. Well, petrol or some fluid that if it vanishes on 5 and 6 quicker than it does 1 and 2, clearly I've got a leak path. It's not very scientific, but it certainly will identify a problem. So I think we'll fill this up with something and then give it an hour and see what happens.
Hold!
I'm still looking for it.
Oh, he's not holding, he's just away. That's him. He's for
We'll be thereabouts. Clock, stopwatch, start. We are an hour in here and there has been no change to levels in 1 and 2. And similarly, level 3 and 4 is exactly the same. So we're definitely not losing a lot of fluid by these rings. However, I'm going to pull the fluid out and check something else. It's not leaking down at all. When I run my finger over that, I can definitely feel it. So I don't know if honing that's going to take it out or not. And to be quite honest, I just don't have enough experience with it to say for sure. But either way, if I need to deal with that, it's take the block out bare and send it to a machine shop, because whether it's going to be honing or machining, they're going to be able to tell me, because they'll probably try honing it first. If it doesn't work, it's a machine. And as a result, an overbore, which means bigger pistons and stuff. So this is quickly growing arms and legs, and I think it might be time that we go back to the drawing board and start a new list. Well, let's be honest, troops, this list probably doesn't apply anymore. We're going to have to do a specific one. And we're joined here by Viking Stig, point of order. Mechanical holder is no more.
Yes.
He's been promoted, he's no longer an apprentice. He's doing all his work himself, therefore.
I have become an expert at using a grinder, not the one that's on a mobile telephone.
So, if you're Instagram at the Viking
Stig.
Yep. There you go. Have a look at his face, the fun.
So, day one of the Viking Stig, things haven't really went well with the Supra.
I've got two options here. So, this scoring in the bores, I've fingered it, and it's pretty deep. I don't know how it's got that deep. I know for a fact there's going to be a reason for it, but we've got two options. We can go.
That's pause out.
That means full bifter, the maximum. Let's just send it.
Yep.
Or we can go the bodge. Now I know in the past, and in fairness, in the future I probably will bodge as well, but this is the dream car. This is the one that has to be done right. So as a result, this is now an option, the balls out, and it should always be an option for this car. So what we need to do if we're going to go balls out, we're going straight down, engine out, block out. We'd need to rework the block, rework the head. We'd need to change all the pistons. We'd need to put new shells in it.
Rip apart the piston rings that you fried.
Yeah, it would be the full bifter forged engine. So the balls out, we've priced this up, and my estimate comes as follows.
£3,873. Is that plus the VAT?
Yeah, that's the VAT included.
Oh, there you go. That's including the VAT.
So the thing about that is that's an eye-watering amount of money, but when we're talking about a straight six Japanese powerhouse of an engine, fully forged for that, bear in mind this does include labour because I'm going to do it myself, actually quite reasonable.
When my Fiesta goes, when, not if, I'm going to buy an off-the-shelf built engine which has got upgraded liners and whatnot, and it's not kicking the arse off that.
Yeah.
So,
and you're off the shelf upgraded
Four-cylinder.
Four-cylinder would be that, and would make 250 feet.
with the parts that's on it, with an aftermarket turbo would make 4. But,
4? Alright, so suddenly putting a Ford 1.6 in might get the same power as that.
Nah.
Bodging it, however, off the shelf standard parts, without dealing with the pistons in the block, just putting it back as it sits in out and getting it running again, about £1,000. Timing belt, water pump, head gasket, and the standard bolts and all that. So I've got two choices here. I can risk it for a biscuit and see how long it lasts with the scoring, or we can send it.
So let's talk about this first. If you put it back together and it gets worse, what are the consequences? The loss of £1,000, we can still hold the balls anyway.
If the balls are dead now, then they'll be just as dead. I think, to be honest, if we've got problems, we need to take the pistons out and rebore it. We'd be reboring it regardless if it gets bad now or worse later on.
But that's the £1,000 demolished.
Yeah.
Upside is it's not £4,000.
It's not £4,000, and the problem, the reason why I'm debating this is that's not the only bill I've got coming up for this car. Remember, we've got paint, we've got interior, we've got
Tires.
everything else, and I've already hit for about 300, 400 quid's worth of clutch work. The bills are stacking up, so I'm going to have to go home and have a think about this. So I'm going to do that. Hi.
Mr. O'Hare,
How we doing?
glad you could make it.
Well, that makes one of us.
So what can we do for you today? I gather you've got some difficulties with your Mark III Toyota Supra.
Yes.
Yes, and what are the difficulties?
All of it.
Not rust.
No, well, you know, you've got to have some wins in life.
Tell me what's wrong.
Total and catastrophic engine destruction.
Oh dear. Perhaps we can help you with that. So, the block, is it cracked?
No.
That's good, so it's something to work with. Right, how do you know it's failed?
We've got some major compression loss, probably down to scoring of the bores.
Well, listen, don't you worry, we can help you out with that. So, we're going to need pistons, some rods, uprated main bearings.
Sure.
Would you like the optional ARP head studs? They're better for holding higher pressure, especially in such a powerful engine.
Okay.
Oil pump, belt kit, gasket kit. We'll be wanting to skim the head as well. Would you like to protect your payments in the event that you're too ill to pay it?
No.
You sure?
For God's
What if I give you £20? Right, I've got a price here.
Right.
So I'm going to go and speak to my manager and see what we can do for you.
Okay.
Would you like a cup of tea or a coffee?
Why not?
Aye.
Okay. Why have I got fucking fear right now?
Aye, that bastard. It's going to be a fortune. Right, Mr. O'Hare, I've had a word with the manager and we can do a special deal for you today, but only today, because he's actually wrote that on it, just so you're aware. So for £3,873, interest free for 100 years. How does this sound?
I mean, painful?
What can I do to get you to buy this product? So
What
here you go.
is the worst that can happen?
There you go. Good man. You can just stick a date on there for me as well. Excellent. A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. O'Hare. Enjoy your 1 JZ.
That was a strange dream. No more cheese before bed. Whatever I'm doing here, the engine needs to come out. So that's today's job. All of that needs to go on the floor, and then all of the things in it need to go in a bucket, and then what's left needs to go to somebody else. And then the bills start. Remember when we did the clutch? Well, now it's time to undo all of that. On the plus side though, the access up the top is going to be a hell of a lot better without a head in the way.
How are you getting on? Are we ready to pull this
I think so.
wee unit out?
I've went round and done my line of sight that we always talk about. Make sure every face of the engine has nothing connected to it, and I think we've got it done. The two mounts, which are good, they hold the engine up, have the nuts off, so the engine is ready to lift. All I've got remaining is 2 bolts at the bottom of the gearbox, because the engine and the gearbox would do that, so that's holding the bottom of the box in place. The problem I've got is we need to drop this and take the engine out from the top, which means I'm going to have to drop it down, get probably a bit of wood and keep a bit of height in the ramp, place it underneath and just take the weight off, knock the 2 bolts out, and then wherever that sits, we then need to take the engine up and out of the way.
Let's get the funk out! I've been watching Binky again.
Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed the yellow pole, which, I'm not going to lie, has obstructed just about every shot I've wanted to get, and all it has done is hold up a bonnet that I'm now removing because we're taking the engine out. I haven't removed the bonnet up until now because I've been in literal denial that this block's coming out, but now that we are putting the crane in, it's in the way. So, should have been done in the first place. It's not just whatever needs it.
There will be troubles ahead.
That was a lot more compact when it was all built, but that is what a 1 JZA looks like as an exploded diagram. I have the stress. Let's not have this lying like that for much longer. However, what we have here is a fully stripped block, and that is now ready to go away to be reworked. Right, Captain's Log Supplemental. So we know the block has scoring on the bores. That's how it's lost compression. But we still need to get to the root cause of why. Because if we fix it, put it back together and it scores the block again, I'm going to have problems. So with that in mind, let's go and have a look at some of the components that have come out and see if there's any clues. And the most obvious one to start with is the pistons, because that's what's done the scoring surely. So here's cylinder 1 piston. As you can see, you've got the skirt for the piston here. Looks a wee bit shiny, probably from heat. Doesn't look like we've had any contact here. So that's a positive sign. Certainly it's doing exactly what it should, and the bores represent that. Similarly, the rings all look in good condition, nice and straight, no signs of damage there. All in all, if I pulled this out of any other engine, I'd be happy with it. Lastly, got no diagonal play in the gudgeon pin. That's the pin that goes through the piston to the rod and would possibly allow it to flex like that. If that happened, the piston will run off true and could potentially touch the block. So, that's a good example. Let's have a look at number 5. We've got a slightly different story here. Look at the skirt of the piston. This is below the firing line, and you'll see that we've actually got some light witness marks. That is quite telling. That says to me that the thing that's touched the bore is most likely been the skirt. We've got some browning below the piston ring line showing that combustion has passed, so this has definitely been letting pressure by. However, the big kind of question mark for me is when I start looking at the rings, because the problem I find here is that the rings don't actually seem to be that bad. Probably going to need to get the gloves off for this part. Now looking at the top ring, if I run my finger across this, I can actually feel little rough marks. That's going to be the cause. That's definitely what's resulted in pickup. Now I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up very well, but right here you might just see the little markings on it. Just looks like tiny little, what's the word? Chips. As I look into the depth of the ring, it doesn't look like there's cracks on it. It's almost like it's been dented by something, and that dent has resulted in the piston just dragging against the wall of the bore when it's went up and down. The strange part for me though, is at the top of the crown as well, that's also got these score marks. So, I'm not entirely sure what the cause is. However, and I'm going to put my glove back on for this. When I take the gudgeon pin and give it a wee twist, there's still no play in it. So, it's certainly pointing some more clues, but it's definitely not conclusive. We may have something deeper to look at here, but I've got to consider what's going to cause dents in the piston ring, which is going to cause it to pick up the bore. Answers in the comments below, because we'll probably have a think of that overnight and come back to in a later episode. But certainly that is why the bore's picked up. The ring has damage and it's caused scoring. Bugger. But the worry here is if the ring's done this because of oil contamination, what does the rest of the stuff look like? Well, there's clues to be found here as well. So, the same piston, if I look at the bearing shells in it, there's actually nothing really to say that there's any damage. You'll see there's some slight discoloration here. That's alright, because it's not actually taking away the hardness of the bearing. Similarly, the other side shows the same story. These bearings are in pretty good condition. So it's not like an oil starvation thing that's caused this. Similarly, we need to have a look at the crank and see if that's in the same state. So I've got the crank lined up in the same way that the engine faces, and similarly so are the cams. This is the main bearing, and that's where the big end bearings live. So this is number 6 and that's number 5. And I've got to admit, that's polished, it's perfect. Ideal condition, doesn't even need a touch of rework before it goes back in. That's really promising, because Christ knows what a crank would cost if I could even find one. But I don't need to even worry about a regrind in this. That is perfect. Similarly, the cams mirror this. All the bearing surfaces are nice and shiny, no signs of scoring or discoloration. That's also a massive win. So I can certainly rule out oil starvation or oil contamination. There's been no evidence to support that. It's just some strangeness going on with the piston rings. But just because it's odd doesn't mean to say that that's not the reason. It could just be the age of the car. Don't forget, it's over 30 years old. All it's going to have taken is some manky oil or something to get by the filter, or potentially something to come in the combustion chamber. Possible fragments, dust, something, and it's caught in that piston ring and dragged up and down. I could feasibly go, right, that's what the problem is, and think no more about it, but we will dig into the rest of the engine components. But first and foremost, we really need to deal with the block. And there it is now going to live for several bloody weeks. This is not what I had in mind, but sadly, it's the hand I've been dealt. Therefore, the only thing that remains with the block in the boot of the car is going to go to a machine shop and see just how bad this is going to be. Spoilers, it's probably going to be pretty damn bad. So what we're going to do in the meantime is move on to some body work probably, mainly because the shell's sitting there doing nothing, so we'll see if we can maybe tidy up some of the finer aspects of things that are bothering me about the shell. And then hopefully, without too much drama, we're going to move on to a build. Now that is going to be a full build, let's be honest. There's no point in having all this engine out unless I'm going to fully forge it. So stay tuned because we are definitely doing a full 1JZ forge build on the channel. I've just got to try and work out how to afford it first. So if you found this, stay tuned. There's going to be multiple Supra episodes in the post. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that jazz. If you want to support us a bit more than that, God knows I'm going to need it, patreon.com/toolsandtrack. That's our way for helping the channel grow, helping things like low cost get built. It purely funds the channel, so any support you can give, greatly appreciated. And until the next time guys, drive safe. We know that the kit. We know that the what? We know that the fuck. So we know that the block has scoring on the bores. That's going to be how. But just because.